The girl at Harriet Creek Ranch. I've been thinking about that night for years, and every time I do, my chest tightens in a way I can't quite explain. It was November 22nd, 2019, around 8 in the evening, when something happened in a quiet little corner of Texas that didn't make sense at the time, and frankly, still doesn't. I remember seeing the footage online the next day, a doorbell camera video that had been uploaded by the homeowners themselves. There she was, a little girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, holding a flashlight, wide-eyed, terrified. She kept glancing over her shoulder like someone, or something, was following her. And she was yelling, begging, "Help, please, please help." You could see the panic radiating off her like heat. Her tiny hands clutched the flashlight as if it were a lifeline. And the most unnerving part, she wasn't trying to hide. She ran straight to that front door, pounding on it with all the desperation in the world. But the house was empty. Vacations. Just another suburban family out of town. So there was no one to answer. And I don't know why, but something about that emptiness made her fear even worse. I watched the video over and over. The footage is grainy, but her voice is clear. And her eyes, there's something in her eyes that doesn't belong in a normal child. It's a kind of raw, unfiltered terror that makes you feel like the air in the room is thick and sticky. I could feel it through the screen. I don't think I've ever felt panic so purely, just radiating from someone else. And then she was gone. No sign of her in the neighborhood, no one saw her leave. It was like she had vanished into thin air. At first I tried to make sense of it. Maybe she was playing a prank, right? Kids these days, but no. Her trembling, the way she was scanning the dark street, the pleading tone of her voice, it wasn't acting. It was real. And that's when the story behind her hit me. Serenity Dennard, a 9-year-old who had gone missing from a youth treatment facility in South Dakota earlier that year. She had a history of running away, they said. Emotional instability, a disorder that made her unpredictable, uncontrollable even. She'd been missing since February 3rd, and hundreds of people had scoured the area looking for her. No clues, nothing. And suddenly there she was, or someone who looked like her, almost 9 months later, standing on a random door in Texas. I remember sitting back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling my heart pound as my mind raced through every possibility. Was she running from someone? Had she been kidnapped? Or was it something worse? Theories online ranged from hopeful to chilling. Some said it was a trick, robbers using a child as bait like something out of a horror movie. But if you watched that video, the way she screamed and pounded on the door, it was impossible to believe she was faking it. This wasn't staged. No one knew what happened to her after that night. The police logged the footage, tried to follow leads, but nothing came of it. Serenity's case went cold. The girl at the door remains unidentified to this day, and I can't help thinking about what must have been running through her mind as she reached for that empty house, crying for help that never came. I spent hours staring at that video, trying to put myself in her shoes, imagining what it would feel like to run through the cold night, to be small and alone and hunted, not knowing if someone would help or if someone would hurt you. I couldn't sleep that night. And when I did, I dreamt of running down empty streets, my own flashlight bobbing in the darkness, and a voice whispering from somewhere just out of sight, always saying, "Help me." It's strange how one event like that can change the way you see the world. Before that night, I thought the world was predictable. People were mostly safe in their homes. Children were safe. But after seeing that little girl, everything shifted. Fear became more immediate, more personal. I began noticing things I never had before, strangers lingering in the shadows, headlights flashing at odd hours, the way my own door creaked sometimes when the wind wasn't blowing. I started thinking about how fragile safety really is. Fast forward a couple of years and that sense of fragility hit again, but in a completely different way. Sydney, Ohio, July 31st, 2022. Allison Duckrow. She was 22, living in a quiet neighborhood, expecting nothing more dangerous than the usual suburban life. But then her ex-boyfriend showed up, James Rail. The night before, he'd sent her a voice message, a rambling, unsettling note about wanting to talk and check in. Innocuous enough on the surface, but the way he said it, the hesitations and pauses, there was something off. The next morning he drove to her house. No warning, no permission, just appeared on her driveway, and when she ignored him, he didn't leave. He circled the house, tried the doors, rattled the windows. I can't imagine the terror she must have felt seeing him out there, his intentions unknown, refusing to go away. The confrontation escalated, and eventually her father had to use a firearm to protect his daughter. That was the end of it, but it could have been so much worse. Just like Serenity, just like that little girl at Harriet Creek Ranch, Allison faced the terrifying randomness of danger that could appear on her doorstep at any moment. It made me think about how close we all are to these moments without realizing it. One second, everything is normal. The next, someone or something appears at your door and your life tilts on its axis. That's the real horror. Not ghosts or monsters, but the very real possibility that someone's intentions are unknowable and your safety can be violated in a heartbeat. And then there were the other instances I began compiling in my mind. Kristen Paul in Fresno, California, woken by a woman banging on her door just after midnight. Sharon Gordon in the UK, murdered by someone she trusted to build an extension on her house. Darrell Wilson in Texas, his home set on fire while he slept, the flames inches from his bedroom. In every case, the doorbell camera or some surveillance footage captured the horror in progress. It was always the same: an intrusion, a threat, and a powerless feeling for the people involved. I started thinking about the pattern, the randomness, the variety of motives, the unpredictable escalation. Sometimes it was a desperate child. Sometimes it was a stalker or an obsessed ex. Sometimes it was someone with a twisted sense of play, leaving symbols, notes, or strange props behind, like the man in Carrollton, North Texas, wearing a satanic goat mask and leaving a note referencing Revelation 20. A single moment, and the ordinary becomes unrecognizable. By the time I finished watching these videos, my room felt smaller, the walls closer. My heart raced. I realized I couldn't look away. Something about these intrusions, these moments of terror, fascinated me in a way I didn't understand. Not in a sick way, necessarily, but in the way a person is drawn to danger they know they cannot control. I remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, imagining the countless possibilities. What would I do if I were Allison or Kristen or Serenity? Would I have the presence of mind to grab the phone? Would I run? Would I hide? And most terrifying of all, what if the intruder knew exactly what I was thinking before I even acted? I started keeping notes, documenting each incident, each little detail. The time, the location, the behavior of the person, how people reacted. And the more I read, the more I realized something. No matter how much security we think we have, the world is full of strangers with unknown intentions, and sometimes all the cameras in the world can't protect you. By the end of that week, I had a list of over a dozen cases, and I knew there were more. I was seeing a pattern, not a clear one, not something that could be easily explained, but a pattern of fear, intrusion, randomness, and the fragility of safety. I couldn't sleep that night. Not really. My mind kept going back to that girl, to Allison, to Kristen, to Sharon. Each story was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry of terror that seemed too vast, too endless. I started thinking about the randomness of danger, about the invisible line separating ordinary life from chaos. One moment you're safe. The next, a knock at the door can become the worst moment of your life. The morning light didn't help. I went through the motions of a normal day, but every shadow seemed sharper, every creak in the floorboards louder. I began noticing things I hadn't before. The mailman taking a little longer to walk past my house, a neighbor's glance lingering just a second too long, the way my front door rattled when the wind blew. The ordinary world suddenly felt unfamiliar, menacing. And then I saw it, a video from North York, Pennsylvania from March 11, 2025. A person dressed in a tie-dye cloak wearing a paper plate mask with jagged red teeth and eerie red eyes had left a box on someone's porch. They announced themselves as the box demon, walked away, and vanished into the darkness as a faint lullaby played. I watched it twice, maybe 3 times, I can't remember. I couldn't understand it. Was it a prank, a threat? a message, or just someone who wanted to terrify for the sake of terrifying. I thought about the people who lived through it, the homeowners waking to find a strange figure leaving a box at their door in the dead of night. Did they scream, freeze, pray? I imagine being in that moment, stepping down the stairs, heart hammering, realizing the world had turned upside down while you slept. That's the part that gets to me, the instant when the normal world flips into something unrecognizable. And it wasn't just that. Gus Jeniskate, an Instagram model, had a man following her home, watching her through the windows, lurking outside while police couldn't intervene because technically no crime had been committed. They said he was a stalker, but stalking is more than a word. It's terror. It's not knowing if your home, your sanctuary, is truly safe. She had to set up booby traps to feel secure. A young woman forced to turn her yard into a fortress because someone wanted to watch her sleep. That's not just scary, that's violation. I began seeing a pattern emerging. The intrusions, the threats, the randomness. Sometimes the danger is obvious, like Allison's ex-boyfriend circling her house, rattling doors and windows. Sometimes it's subtle, like the man lurking outside Gus's home, the terror invisible to anyone but the victim. Sometimes it's something more symbolic, like the goat-masked man leaving a note about Revelation 20, referencing Satan, judgment, and eternal torment. Sometimes it's death, like with Sharon Gordon in the UK, killed by someone she trusted. And I realized something even more disturbing. The victims weren't always prepared. They weren't expecting it. Some of them had cameras, some didn't. Some called police, some had to take matters into their own hands. But the fear was universal. It didn't discriminate. Children, young women, the elderly, entire families. The intrusions could hit anyone, anywhere. And sometimes the trauma lasted longer than any physical damage. I remember Darrell Wilson in Texas, asleep at 1 a.m. when flames suddenly lit up his front yard, only inches from the house. Someone had poured gasoline and set fire to it before fleeing. There was no one to stop it. No one could know exactly who had done it or why. The attack seemed random, but it wasn't random at all. It was personal. Someone had a reason that only they understood. And for the Wilsons, their world had suddenly become fragile, unsafe, and unpredictable. I began connecting dots in my mind that maybe weren't connected at all. But in my imagination, the randomness of these attacks started to feel like threads in a larger tapestry of fear. It wasn't just about individual cases. It was about the thin line separating safety from terror, a line so delicate that any random knock, any stranger at the door, could shatter it completely. I thought back to the girl at Harriet Creek Ranch. I tried to picture her alone, running through the darkness. Maybe she had been hiding, maybe she had been escaping someone worse than anything I could imagine. And she chose that door, any house in the middle of that neighborhood. Her choice was desperate and arbitrary, but it carried with it the weight of survival instinct. I felt the kind of helplessness you can't describe unless you've been there, running, screaming, begging, and finding nothing. I began thinking about my own house. What if it happened to me? The idea was terrifying, and I started noticing subtle things. A shadow lingering outside when no one should be there, the wind blowing a door slightly ajar, the faint sound of movement in the night. I began setting up extra locks, cameras, alarms, anything I could think of. But the truth is, security is never complete. It's never enough. And the realization that my own home could one day be invaded by someone who wants to terrify me, or worse, settled into my mind like a stone. I remember one night I stayed awake for hours, watching doorbell camera footage of break-ins, intrusions, and strange visitors. I couldn't look away. The fear was addictive. There's a strange, perverse clarity in watching real fear unfold. And I began keeping a journal, documenting each incident, noting the details. The time, the behavior of the intruder, the reactions of the victims, the outcomes. I wanted to understand it, to make sense of the senseless. But the more I documented, the less sense it made. The world wasn't safe, and maybe it never had been. Sometimes I imagined the girl from Harriet Creek Ranch, running somewhere in the dark, a flashlight shaking in her hand, her voice echoing through the streets asking for help. Sometimes I imagine Allison circling her house, the ex-boyfriend circling, the fear palpable, heart racing, doors rattling, and she doesn't know if she will survive. Sometimes I imagine Sharon Gordon lying on the floor, blood spreading across the carpet, and the sudden realization that the people you trust can betray you in the worst possible way. And I realize the true horror isn't the act itself. It's the randomness, the lack of control, the knowledge that no matter how careful you are, how vigilant, how prepared, someone or something could decide to invade your life. And that's a kind of fear that never goes away. It becomes part of you, a shadow following you, whispering it could happen to you next. By the time part one of my observations ended, I had watched dozens of cases. Each one left me more anxious, more aware of the fragility of everyday life. And yet I couldn't stop. I had to see the patterns. I had to understand the horror that waited at the threshold of ordinary homes, hiding behind doorbells, hedges, and dark streets. I had to face it, even if only through the lens of a camera. And maybe that's the ultimate horror. The one that lingers long after the intruder leaves, long after the flames are extinguished, long after the child vanishes into the night. The horror that seeps into your mind, whispers in the dark, and refuses to let you feel safe again. The realization that the world can change in an instant, that terror can appear on your doorstep at any time, and that sometimes no one, not even the police, can protect you. I kept thinking about the randomness of danger, about how it could strike at any time in any place from anyone, or from something that shouldn't exist in the normal world. And then I saw it. The footage from Carrollton, North Texas, January 18, 2025. A man dressed entirely in black, wearing a red satanic goat mask, standing on a porch holding a cardboard box. At first he didn't move much, just stood there. But there was a deliberate, eerie stillness to him, like he was waiting for something or someone to notice him, and I noticed. My stomach twisted the moment I saw that mask. I don't know why the mask scared me so much. Maybe because it wasn't just a mask. It was a statement. It screamed, "I am chaos. I am here to make you afraid." And then he left the box. A sign with the words Revelation 20, 1-15 was left behind, referencing binding of Satan, resurrection, judgment, eternal torment. I stared at the footage for a long time. The homeowner's voice trembling in the follow-up interview haunted me. "I'm scared. I'm scared to leave the house. I'm scared to be at the house." That sentence, so simple, cut through the ordinary noise of the world like a knife. One man, one moment, and the feeling of safety vanished entirely. That night I couldn't sleep. I imagined him standing outside my own house. I pictured the mask, the box, the verse. I pictured the possibilities, what was inside that box. Was it a threat, a warning, or just a game? But the thought alone made my hands sweat and my chest tighten. The randomness of his act was terrifying. He didn't target a person with reason, not that anyone could understand. He just appeared like a shadow from another world, leaving behind the echo of fear. Then came Sharon Gordon in Dudley, UK, July 21, 2023. She hadn't been seen for days. When two friends went to her house, they found her lying face down near the stairs, blood pooling around her. The police discovered that her contractor, Peter Norgrove, had killed her with a hammer. 15 months of delays, frustration, confrontation, rage. He snapped. And in that moment, an ordinary relationship, an ordinary contract became deadly. The doorbell camera caught everything. Him leaving blood on his trousers, the murder weapon discovered in his shed later. It wasn't just random fear. It was calculated, deliberate, but somehow banal, like terror had grown out of everyday frustration. I began to notice something about these stories. The fear didn't come in one form. It came in multiple forms. The unpredictable, like the child running to the wrong door in Texas. The obsessive, like the man stalking Gus Genescate. The psychotic, like Peter Norgrove. The ritualistic, like the goat-masked visitor in Carrollton. The symbolic, like the box demon in North York. Each one was terrifying in its own way. But the effect was the same. The victims never saw it coming. Kristen Paul in Fresno, California, October 6, 2024. She thought she was opening her door to her husband returning home. Midnight, sleepy, safe. And then an unknown woman, wild-eyed, enraged, demanding entry. The woman became violent when Kristen shut the door, tried the windows, Kristen armed herself, called the police. Minutes later, the danger was gone, but the fear remained, and that fear is insidious. It doesn't stop when the intruder leaves. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the footsteps behind you, in the shadows at the corner of your vision. And then the Wilson family in Midlothian, Texas, August 12, 2025. 1 a.m., a bright flash in the yard, flames, gasoline, danger inches from the house. Their daughter wakes her father. Firefighters arrive just in time. The suspect wears a hoodie and mask, unknown identity. Retaliation for a lawsuit, they think. But how can anyone truly feel safe when someone can act with such malice, with such precision, and vanish before they're caught? I imagine myself in their shoes, rushing down the stairs, heart pounding, fire inches from my life, and realizing that the world can turn lethal in an instant. Then came the North York box demon. March 11, 2025. A figure in a colorful tie-dye cloak, paper plate mask with jagged teeth and red eyes carrying a cardboard box, announces itself as the box demon, leaves a faint lullaby playing behind. Nothing in the box, apparently, but the psychological impact, unmeasurable. I can't get the image out of my head. I replay it, imagining myself opening that box at 2 a.m. alone in silence. The anticipation is worse than the act itself. The terror is in the imagination, in the uncertainty, in the feeling that the world is not only unsafe but indifferent to your fear. Gus Genescate's stalker in June 2023. The unknown man lingering outside her home, peering through windows, disappearing before action could be taken. She couldn't sleep. She had to set up a rope booby trap. Weeks later, he tripped on it, stood outside her bedroom window, staring. Police could do nothing. She had to leave, move, start over. Imagine leaving your home because someone wanted to terrorize you because the law couldn't protect you. That's a horror that doesn't end in a single moment. It continues. Every step you take in the dark, every glance outside, every creak in the house becomes a reminder that someone might still be out there. And then Alexandria, Virginia. Late one night, 3 masked figures in full Halloween costumes. 10 p.m., ringing the doorbell, shaking the doorknob, knocking aggressively, threatening the family inside. It's either you come out or we come in. I can hear those words echoing in my mind. 6 to 10 minutes. That's all it took to turn a normal evening into terror, threats, aggression, impunity, and the family forced into hiding, unsafe in their own home. The most ordinary fundamental right, to feel safe in your house, stolen in moments. I sat for hours watching these videos, reading reports, imagining what it would feel like to be on the receiving end. I started noticing my own paranoia. Shadows became people. Doors weren't locked enough. Windows were vulnerable. Every stranger on the street was a potential threat. I began thinking, the world is filled with invisible monsters. Some wear masks, some carry boxes, some hold grudges, some are simply lost or insane, some are invisible until they're at your doorstep. The common thread was fear. Not just fear in the moment, but fear that lingers. Fear that changes your perception of reality, warps your understanding of safety. Fear that stays with you when the intruder is gone, when the fire is out, when the box is empty. It's fear that haunts the quiet moments when the house is still, when night falls, when you're alone with your thoughts. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to look away. Each story was a mirror reflecting what could happen anywhere to anyone, including me. And in that reflection, I saw myself staring back at a world where terror wasn't a story in the news. It was a potential reality, a knock away, a shadow away, a fire away. The randomness of it all, the way it could strike without reason or warning, was the real horror. I keep thinking about the randomness of terror, the way it can appear, unannounced, anywhere. By now, the stories I've followed, watched, and imagined have become almost too real to bear. It's not the physical danger that haunts me. It's the uncertainty, the not knowing, the sudden intrusion into ordinary life that turns safety into illusion. Take the case of Allison Duckrow in Sydney, Ohio, July 31, 2022. Allison was 22, just returning home after breakfast with her mother. Simple, ordinary morning. But then a car pulled into the driveway. The driver was James Rail, Allison's ex-boyfriend, someone she hadn't spoken to in over 18 months. He had sent her a voice note the night before, vague, creeping, unnerving. By the time he arrived, Allison didn't even respond. She didn't give permission. She tried to ignore him, but he circled the house, looking for a way in, returned to the front door, tried to force it open. The confrontation escalated so quickly that her father had no choice but to use a firearm. Minutes later, it was over. I can't stop thinking about those minutes, the way ordinary life can be shattered by someone who refuses to respect boundaries, who disregards law and safety. Allison survived. Her father was acquitted, thanks to doorbell camera footage. But what about the ones who aren't so lucky? What about the moments before safety is restored? That's where the terror hides. Then there's the fire in Midlothian, Texas, August 12, 2025. The Wilson family asleep. 1 a.m. bright flash outside, flames licking the yard, inches from the house. I can imagine waking to that, heart pounding, instinct kicking in, a child screaming, parents scrambling. Darrell Wilson called the fire department, but in those seconds before the flames are extinguished, you are at the mercy of someone else's malice. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who could vanish into the night, leaving you shaken, terrified, powerless. And the North York box demon, March 11, 2025. A figure in a tie-dye cloak, jagged paper plate mask, red eyes, carrying a cardboard box, announces itself in a high, distant voice. I am the box demon. Leaves a lullaby playing as it walks away. Empty box, harmless, maybe. But terror isn't always in the physical act. It's in the symbolism, the intrusion into your mind, the invasion of your sense of normalcy. It's the realization that someone has observed you, followed you, and toyed with your fear. Gus Genescate's stalker is no different. Weeks of harassment, lurking, peering, disappearing, police powerless. The stalker returned even after traps. She had to move. Leave home. That's not just fear, that's displacement, violation, permanent change in life. The fear seeps into every waking moment. Every stranger outside is suspect. Every creak in the floor becomes a threat. You begin to live in shadows. You begin to imagine monsters around every corner. And then Alexandria, Virginia. Late night, 3 masked figures, Halloween costumes, knocking aggressively, shaking doorknobs, threats. It's either you come out or we coming in. 6 to 10 minutes. Minutes that feel like hours when your life is at stake. The family was forced into hiding. Their home became a cage, their sanctuary violated. I can almost hear the knocks echoing in my ears. I can imagine the cold sweat, the pounding heart, the terror bleeding into every thought. I start seeing the pattern, not just one type of horror but multiple. Random terror, obsessive stalking, psychotic rage, ritualistic symbolism. The intruder may leave a box, a mask, a fire, or nothing at all. Sometimes it's the absence that terrifies most, the silence that follows, the questions that remain. Who are they? Why me? When will it happen again? That uncertainty gnaws at the mind until fear becomes the constant companion. I think about the girl from Harriet Creek Ranch, Texas, November 22, 2019. Distressed, begging for help at a stranger's door. A child lost, scared, possibly fleeing a life-threatening situation. The footage shows her checking behind herself, terrified of pursuit. But when the homeowners noticed, she was gone. That desperate cry, unanswered, unresolved, it's the purest form of horror. The human vulnerability exposed for all to see, yet untouched by protection or justice. Her identity never confirmed. Serenity Dennard, a runaway, or something worse. That unknown lingers, unresolved, gnawing at the imagination like an invisible shadow. Then Carrollton, the goat-masked man, Revelation 20, the symbolism, the implication, the psychological intrusion into someone's mind. You cannot defend against it legally, physically, or emotionally. It's not about action. It's about perception. Fear exists in your mind long after the visitor has gone, long after the cameras have stopped recording. I find myself packing the room, imagining these incidents converging into a single, incomprehensible timeline of terror. My heart races as I try to separate real threats from imagined ones. But the boundary blurs. Every knock, every shadow, every unexpected movement feels like a prelude to catastrophe. The stories I've seen and the footage I've reviewed have altered my perception of the world. Every step outside carries a fraction of the dread I've witnessed. Every door I lock is a small, temporary shield against an infinite spectrum of potential horrors. And that's the horror that terrifies me most. Not the act itself, but the inevitability of possibility. That anywhere, anyone, at any time, terror can arrive uninvited. The randomness of danger, the multiplicity of forms, the fragility of normalcy. There is no single intruder, no single pattern. There is only vigilance, paranoia, and the haunting question, will it happen again? And when it does, will anyone be prepared? I sit alone in my apartment, watching the last frames of these videos. The masked figures, the intruders, the flames, the stalking, each image lingers, amplifies, magnifies in the darkness of my mind. I hear the imagined footsteps outside, the knock on the door that never comes. And I realize that the true horror isn't what is captured on camera. It's what is. It's the unknown, the unpredictable, the invisible threat that could strike the next door down, the next street over, the next moment of ordinary life. I write these stories, narrate them, imagine them because it's a way to confront the fear. But the fear never leaves. It sits with me, whispers to me, reminds me that safety is fragile, fleeting, and often merely an illusion. And I know deep down that no matter how many cameras, locks, alarms, or precautions, terror will always find a way to knock. Always. And in that realization, I feel the coldest, most human terror of all, helplessness. Not from the events themselves, not from the intruders, not from the fires or the boxes or the masked figures, but from knowing that at any moment in any place, the world can turn against you, unprovoked, unannounced, and that you will be powerless to stop it. That is the true horror. That is the shadow we all live under, whether we see it or not. And I will never forget it.